songs, you're getting keyboards. Stick with me, and you'll get what you fell in love with in the first place. We're going to give you hardline rock and roll.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to get a couple moments of camp here, like, I'm easy or whatever.
Right.
But you're going to get these guys who are premier musicians in Steve Vai, Billy Sheehan, and Greg Bissonette. You're going to have these Van Halen assassins, as I think Ted Templeman might have called it. Well, what are you doing trying to keep up with Van Halen? You can't do that. And he lost that whole, not the whole audience, but he lost that whole crew of people that he brought over with him and said, You want rock and roll, stick with me.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. But do you really think Skyscraper was his downfall? He had a huge hit on that album with Just Like Paradise. Dave's going in a poppier direction, introducing a lot of keyboards. I don't think that album is terrible. Although they went in a different direction, the songs are still solid. Meanwhile, Van Halen was releasing OU812, arguably its poppiest album, and they were having hit after hit on that album. It seemed like both of them were going in the same direction, which is lighter and poppier. It seems like everyone was making a conscious move to go that way, and maybe if the band stayed together, they could have been in sync.
I don't think that Dave would have wanted to do all of what was being done on OU812, and I think that he took affront to 5150 being so successful, people in his ear and in his face saying, oh, they finally got their number one album, and they did it without you. He's like, man, well, I got to do something to keep up with them. And I think it was keeping up. I don't think it was keeping up with the times as much as it was keeping up with Van Halen. And yeah, Dave had a nice big hit with Just Like Paradise, but I mean, the rest of that record, it's not horrible by any stretch, but he lost his band.
Yeah.
He was losing fans.
Yep.
I mean, that tour was just falling apart as the more it went on. And I know it was his most expansive tour, I think, ever as a solo artist, as far as all the countries that it visited, which was great to go in for the fans in Australia and in Japan or whatnot. But as far as Dave, everything was falling apart behind the scenes. Nobody was happy with that record. And I don't think that his heart was in it after that.
What was the first Van Halen show you saw?
It was on the Balance tour.
The Balance tour, okay. So now I saw the 5150 tour, and in 1986, I was 16 years old at the time. Now, I had been a huge fan. I wanted to go see the 1984 tour, and I was too late to the punch and didn't get tickets. It was sold out and blah, 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 and I couldn't afford the scalp tickets. So I had to sit home from that one, which killed me, but I was dying to see the band. Went to see them in 1986 with Sammy. I was in shock at the set list. I could not freaking believe how little old Van Halen songs they played. It was absolutely shocking. The only thing they played was Panama, Ain't Talking About Love, and You Really Got Me, which is, You Really Got Me is not even a Van Halen song. So they were playing Sammy Hagar's song. And I actually happen to love Sammy Hagar's solo music, but it's not what I want to hear at a Van Halen show. And I Can't Drive 55, and they did a Montrose song, and Rock Candy, and they also did There's Only One Way to Rock. So I find it incredible that Sammy took the job as the lead singer of Van Halen and then told Van Halen he doesn't want to sing Van Halen songs. Now, this is one thing, you make a comparison in the book to AC/DC. One thing I have to give Brian Johnson is he never, ever wanted to not sing old AC/DC songs. He honors Bon Scott. He plays that era. And, also the band also kept up with the same kind of vibe. I mean, AC/DC, although it's not exactly the same with Brian Johnson, it was still in the same vein and direction that they were heading in. So what do you make of Sam coming in and just, calling all the shots and saying, I'm going to take this job, but I'm not going to do what's required of the job?
First of all, it's absolutely insane. Like you said, you join the band Van Halen and you don't play Van Halen songs, and you refuse to sing their biggest hit and instead have local radio DJs come up and sing Jump, or you have someone from the crowd come up and sing Jump. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. But I think the love fest was at its peak with Eddie having this feeling that all of a sudden he was so creatively unrestrained. You want to write keyboard songs? Go ahead, write keyboard songs. You want to do a guitar song? That's fine too. But live, how about we just do this? Sure, Sam, that's great, as long as I can do what I want going forward. And it was maybe a way in Eddie's mind of, I'm not going to look in the rear view. We're going to move forward with Sam. We're not going to look back too deep into the Dave catalog. We're not going to do too many songs. I'm fine with that. I want to focus on the now. But when you're doing that, you're alienating so much of your fan base. And I don't see how they didn't say, look, Sam, you got to do more than just a couple songs. And you have so many opportunities in those set lists. In the 5150 set list, you're doing Rock and Roll by Zeppelin. You're doing Wild Thing by the Trogs. You're doing Sammy and Montrose songs. They're all slots that could have been and should have been filled by Dave songs.
Yeah, totally.
If David passed like Bon Scott did, I think maybe Sammy would have been more amenable to doing that material. But you don't want to get out there and sing your competitor's music, especially when you've got Dave out there rubbing his face in it.
Yeah.
You know, saying, okay, well, I don't have to go out there and sing any of his songs. I mean, Dave's not out there trying to sing Why Can't This Be Love?
Right.
Not that he could, but,
right.
you know, fans don't want to hear that from him. But when you go to see the Van Halen band, you want to hear the songs from the Van Halen band.
Well, of course.
And that was an extreme disservice to the fans, I think.
Yeah.
And I love Sammy. I love the Sammy songs.
Right.
I love the Sammy era. And I really wish that he had been more like Gary, where Gary was just, I mean, Gary was in the toughest position ever, but when he came into the band, he was like, I'll sing whatever.
Yeah.
You gotta ask, how did they pull this off, right? Here's a band who is hardly playing any of their old songs live. The band did no videos. They're like, we're a new band, but they still insist on calling themselves Van Halen. It seems like they are making every decision that anyone else would shoot themselves in the foot with. But somehow they are just as big as they ever were. How did they pull all that off?
I think there's two reasons why that happened. One is it's a testament to how great the songs were on 5150. Some of those songs to this day are untouchable. I mean, you can see the keyboards, it's a little dated, this, that, the production, whatever, but those songs are great songs. And another reason is you had Dave out there. You want to see old Van Halen, you want to hear all the old Van Halen songs, go see Dave.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're going to get every night.
Right.
So you had the choice. You could say, all right, I like the Van Hagar stuff, but I also like the old stuff. Well, I can have again, with these puns, but, the best of both worlds. You can go see both bands and get your fix from both things. Had Dave gone away, had Dave gone and become a movie star and fans had no way to see those songs, I don't think they would have put up with it. I think they would have been like, you got to be kidding me. Going and seeing all this, I didn't come to see Van Halen play Wild Thing.
I know. That's exactly how I felt. I'm like, wait a minute. I start adding up the songs. Wild Thing, Addicted to Love, Rock Candy, I Can't Try 55, There's Only One Way to Rock. I'm like, this could all be Van Halen. So what the fuck is going on? And not only that, but I don't know if you've ever heard, but they did an entire guitar duel between Eddie and Sam. It's almost like they were filling time. It was the craziest shit. So what I really think happened was I think this all came down to the fact that the Van Halen adopted Sammy's manager, Ed Loeffler. And I think that, with Sammy coming in, and you've heard this because you've done the research and it's in your book, I believe, where Sammy thinks he was as big as Van Halen when he came into Van Halen, which is laughable beyond belief. And also, the other thing I'm going to mention is what you also added, in addition to 5150 being a very strong album, they were also coming off 1984, so the band was beloved at that point. So, they could kind of do no wrong, for sure. But I tell you, I really think Ed Loeffler sat them down and said, all right, I tell you what, you do Panama and ain't talk about love, Sammy, we'll throw in I Can't Drive 55 and There's Only One Way to Rock for you, all right? We do the whole new album with the exception of Inside, each take a solo, maybe we'll do a guitar duel, let's throw a few covers and we got a show. It's almost like it was like that because, like Dave said, it's a miracle. Like, how did you get away with, in 1986, not doing videos? Not doing a video for an album back in 86 was like absolutely career suicide. That's number one. Number two was Ed Loeffler had the attitude like, they want to see the band, they got to pay to see the band. That was their whole,
see the show.
That was his whole attitude. It's a miracle that it all worked. It really was. And in your book, it talks about like how Sammy was very nervous about it because the shoes were big to fill. Another thing you mentioned in the book, which I think is very important to mention, is the very big anti-Dave movement that was really, really drumming up. I was there. I was at the shows. The signs, Sammy would look in the crowd for all these signs, anything he could pick up, David Lee Who, and all of this stuff to make fun of Dave and all this stuff. It was absolutely insanity, especially considering they're on the same label, right? I mean, you're kind of really causing problems. And there's a quote in your book where Eddie kind of makes an apology to Dave. I don't know where you sourced this from, but it was a really interesting quote. He says here, "I said a few things in anger, that I should apologize for," the guitarist said, adding bluntly, "I cried, I was bummed, I slagged him in the press because I was pissed and I was hurt. The thing was, Dave is a creative guy and working with him was no problem. It was living with the guy." Which I don't understand, because who's asking him to live with Dave? At that point, they were wealthy enough that they could take their own buses, see you at rehearsal, see you at sound check. I mean, he wasn't living with the guy. I mean, it's just a really strange set of circumstances.
Yeah, but I think Ed always wanted them to be a band. Even when 1996 came around, when Ed and Dave reunited, and then the whole thing blew up, Ed called him the same old Dave. Ed expects a certain camaraderie and loyalty. It's more than just showing up and rehearsing.
I think that Ed he didn't have to live with Dave. You're right. But he kind of wanted to. And I don't think in the literal sense, but maybe, because didn't he and Sammy have a place like 2 doors away from each other in Malibu?
Yeah.
I mean, they're riding their cars together, racing up and down the streets all the time. He wanted that camaraderie. And I don't think with a personality like Dave, you get that. You don't get that thing where we're hanging out all the time. Hey, just come by the studio, we'll jam. Especially in the later years, that doesn't happen. Everything has to be scheduled. But he wanted kind of a friend, which is why it was so important to him when they did that reunion that, wow, we're just hanging out and we're just, smoking cigars at Dave's house. We never did this before. If you listen to Eddie's comments, he's looking for a connected soul. He used that word so much with Gary.
Yeah.
It's his brother. I think he's used that with every singer that he's had, that this is my brother.
Yeah.
This is my brother. This is my new brother. He wants a family thing. He wants that family feeling.
Do you think it's because he was so spoiled to have his brother on drums and that he wanted, everything to be like that?
Yeah, I think that both he and Alex wanted the main focus of your life, if you're going to be in this band, to be the band.
Right.
And I think that Michael, as easygoing as he is, would just go along with whatever they wanted. If they called him at 3 a.m. and said, come to the studio, he would do it. And with Sammy, it was like that. I think that they had that vibe where they hung out all the time. It looked like Sammy, he would rather be nowhere else than in the room with Van Halen. And when he started to pull away from that a little bit, as early as around before the recording of For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, they took offense to that.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you mean you're going to deal with your wife and her mental problems? You can't do that. Van Halen is the focus.
Right.
But no, that's their life, but it's not everybody else's.
Yeah,
I mean,
know.
They lived at 5150 Studios.
I know.
Alex and Eddie lived there.
Yeah.
The ultimate irony is when Sammy left the band, he cranked out album after album, and Ed and Al did not.
It's amazing. That's what's so incredible. So wanted to ask you, with Gary, why do you think Ed was so in love with Gary? Was it Gary that he was in love with, or just a guy who is just going to live in his guest house and be available for him 24/7?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, Gary's a great guy. You look at the way he's handled everything. The old joke is, Michael Anthony's a class act, which he is. But Gary's a class act, too. You never hear him say anything bad. He's never talked crap about Dave, never talked crap about Sammy. Most amenable guy that they probably could have ever found to be in that band. And he's going to live in my guest house? Sure, this guy's great. And he's doing everything that Eddie wants. Anything musically that Eddie brings up, Gary will do.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, it's so funny because it almost seemed like that was sort of a fever dream. If you remember, and I'm sure you did this in the research, if you read all the press for Van Halen 3, first of all, you never saw Ed talk to the press that much, number one. That was the most he ever talked to the press was during Van Halen 3. Number two, everything is Gary. Let's talk about Gary. Everything is Gary. And Gary, off stage, is low key as can be. He's very quiet. He's very low key. He's very humble. He's a wild front man. He's great on stage. He's a great performer. Off the stage, very reserved, quiet guy. I mean, literally next to Sam and Dave, an absolute church mouse. I mean, it's unbelievable. Almost like, how is this guy the lead singer of Van Halen? There's no spark in him. And don't get me wrong, I think on stage, he did a fantastic job. He performed both Dave and Sam eras. I loved the Van Halen 3 tour. I thought it was great. It was a great show. But he did a fantastic job with those songs. But it's interesting. Like, there's a lot more that carries the weight to be the lead singer of Van Halen. I almost feel like he was crushed by the legend of it all. What do you think?
I think that Eddie took over as frontman of the group for that whole